The conference room went dead silent when Julian Bradley told me I didn't understand enterprise-level architecture. This was my architecture. I had built it from scratch 32 years ago. But there he sat, fresh Yale diploma, probably still smelling like printer toner, earning twice my salary to mansplain my own security protocols back to me. HR said I needed to accept my level. At 10:10 in the morning on a Tuesday, I sent one email, just one. By 11, their entire infrastructure was having what I would call a catastrophic identity crisis. I am Richard Vance, and for over 3 decades, I was the senior systems administrator at Apex Financial Partners. Not the flashy title people dream about, but the person who kept $75 million in daily transactions from disappearing into the digital void. The person who stopped ransomware attacks at 3 in the morning while everyone else slept. The person who made sure the CEO could brag about 99.9% uptime without understanding what those numbers actually cost. It started 6 weeks before everything fell apart. I was running diagnostics on the email servers when my supervisor Brenda appeared at my office door with that expression people get when they are about to ruin your day but pretend they are doing you a favor. She asked if I had a minute, already closing the door. Brenda had been with Apex for 10 years, managing the IT department with what I generously call enthusiastic incompetence. Nice enough person could not tell a router from a toaster, but she had an MBA, which apparently trumped actually knowing how computers worked. She told me they were bringing someone in above her, a director of technology infrastructure. I saved my work carefully because when people add unnecessary management layers, nothing good follows. I asked what was wrong with our current structure. She claimed it was about expansion and growth. You know how the executive board loves optimization. Optimization. That word had been floating around the hallways like a bad smell for months. Usually meant someone in a corner office had been to a seminar and discovered buzzwords. I asked who it was. She said Julian Bradley. He had impressive credentials, a Yale Business School degree, consultation experience with some major tech firms. She said it like she was reading from a press release. Probably was. I asked what his actual systems background was. Brenda shifted her weight and said he was more strategic level, big picture thinking. She assured me I would still handle the technical implementation, obviously. Translation: he would have opinions about things he did not understand, and I would do the actual work while he took credit. Tale as old as corporate hierarchies. After the meeting, Julian scheduled one-on-ones with the whole IT department. Mine was at 2 in the afternoon. His office was on the executive floor, already a bad sign. Good IT leadership stays near their team, near the server rooms, near the actual work. Executive floor meant he saw himself as management first, technology distant second. He told me it was great to finally connect, gesturing at a chair across from his massive desk. Everything about his office screamed. He was important. The mahogany furniture, the degrees framed on the wall, the books about leadership that had clearly never been opened. He asked me to walk him through my current responsibilities, pulling out an actual notepad like he was about to document my job. My job I had been doing since before he learned to tie his own shoes. Friday afternoon, Julian called me into his office. He leaned back in his chair like a king on a throne and told me he had reviewed my approach for the weekend update and had some concerns. I had sent him the technical documentation 3 days ago, willing to bet he had not opened it. I asked what concerns he had. He claimed the methodology felt reactive rather than proactive, and that we should be thinking about this systematically, not just applying patches. I reminded him it was a critical security update. The vulnerability was published 2 weeks ago, and we were already behind where we should be. He pushed back, asking what the strategic framework was, and how it aligned with our broader technology roadmap. I counted to 5 silently. I told him the framework was keeping our transaction system from being exploited, and the alignment was not getting hacked. Julian's expression tightened. He did not like being contradicted, especially not with actual facts. He told me I was missing the bigger picture, and that this tunnel vision was what held organizations back. He said I was so focused on the technical weeds that I was not seeing the strategic forest. The technical weeds? The technical weeds that kept his paycheck from bouncing? I asked what he would suggest instead, keeping my voice level. He proposed a comprehensive review. Bring in stakeholders, assess the full impact scope, develop a phased implementation strategy with proper governance oversight. I told him that would take weeks, and this vulnerability was being actively exploited in the wild right now. He brushed it off, saying we would implement additional monitoring safeguards in the interim. He lacked any understanding of the subject. Monitoring does not stop exploitation, it just lets you watch yourself get attacked. But he was the director. I was just the systems administrator. I updated the system Saturday night anyway, did not tell him, did not ask permission, just did my job. By Sunday morning, our transaction processing was secure and nothing had broken. Shocking, considering I had only been doing this for 32 years. Patricia from Human Resources leaned forward, displaying all her practiced sympathy. She said she thought what Julian was trying to express was that organizational structure exists for a reason. She claimed that when they have leadership with Julian's credentials and experience, it is important to trust their strategic guidance. Julian stood up, a power move, trying to literally look down on me. He said he thought we were done there. He told me to consider this a formal warning. Any future insubordination or failure to follow directives would result in escalated disciplinary action up to and including termination. He said Patricia would document this conversation. I looked at Patricia, who was already writing notes in that serious folder. I looked at Julian, radiating smug certainty that his degree and his suit and his executive title made him right. I looked at Brenda, who had avoided eye contact this entire meeting. I told them I understood. I went back to my office, closed the door, and sat at my desk surrounded by 3 monitors showing system statuses and security logs and network traffic patterns. My coffee mug that said, "No, I cannot fix your printer," that my son Jason had given me for Christmas. The photo of my wife Karen and the kids from last summer's camping trip. The little succulent plant that somehow survived, despite my complete inability to remember watering schedules. Toby knocked around 10:30. He asked if everything was okay, mentioning he heard raised voices earlier. I lied and told him everything was fine. I told him it was just strategic alignment discussions. He winced and mentioned that Julian had been asking him to document all my processes. Toby said Julian mentioned something about capturing institutional knowledge and reducing key person dependencies. He asked if that was normal, capturing institutional knowledge, reducing key person dependencies. They were planning to replace me. Of course they were. Julian could not have someone around who actually knew what they were doing, who could casually expose his incompetence just by doing their job well. Easier to push me out, hire someone junior who would not question his strategic vision, and hope everything kept running on the momentum I had built. I told Toby it was totally normal. That night, I went home and did not mention any of it to Karen. She was dealing with her own work stress, budget cuts at the architectural firm, layoff rumors, the usual corporate nonsense. Jason had a college project due. Lily needed help with algebra. Normal family chaos that felt like a different universe from the one where I was being systematically undermined. Wednesday morning, Julian sent out an email announcing a technology infrastructure reorganization initiative. It was a lot of words that boiled down to him hiring 2 junior administrators to work under him, and my role being refocused on legacy system maintenance. Legacy system maintenance. The polite way of saying I would be babysitting old code in a corner while he brought in people who did what they were told. The new hires started the following Monday. Sarah and Mark, both fresh out of college with computer science degrees and 0 real-world experience. Enthusiastic, friendly, and completely out of their depth. Julian had them reporting to him directly. I was supposed to provide technical guidance, but all major decisions flowed through him now. Within 3 days, Mark had misconfigured the backup system. He did not realize it until I was checking logs and noticed our incremental backups had not actually run in 72 hours. If something had crashed during that window, we would have lost 3 days of financial transactions. I fixed it quietly, did not make a big deal. Mark was a good kid, just inexperienced and working for someone who could not tell him he had screwed up because Julian did not know what a properly configured backup system looked like. Week 2. Sarah granted database access to the wrong user group. Suddenly, people in marketing could see client financial data. It was a catastrophic compliance violation that could have cost Apex their license. I caught it during a routine security audit, fixed it, documented it, and sent a gentle email to Sarah explaining why database permissions mattered. Julian called me into his office an hour later. That night, I finally told Karen everything. We were sitting on the back porch after the kids went to bed. Him with a beer, me with a glass of scotch I desperately needed. She asked if this guy was really making twice my salary to do essentially nothing after I had laid it all out. I told her it was worse than nothing. He was actively making things harder while taking credit for the work. She asked if I could go over his head and talk to the chief technology officer or someone. I explained that the chief technology officer, Winston, was who hired him. Julian had the right credentials on paper, fancy degree, consultant background, said all the right corporate things. I was just the person who had been keeping their systems running for over 30 years. I asked her to guess which one looked better in board meetings. Karen was quiet for a minute. She asked what I wanted to do. That was the question, was it not? I was 58 years old, starting over somewhere new at this age, in a field that often preferred younger workers. Not impossible, but not simple, and I had built something at Apex. The infrastructure was not just a job, it was 3 decades of careful work, of systems that fit together elegantly, because I understood every piece. Walking away meant watching it all fall apart under Julian's incompetent management. I found the issue within 20 minutes. One of the server nodes had a memory leak in a third-party plugin. Simple fix, disable the buggy plugin, apply a patch, monitor to make sure it's stabilized. Standard maintenance. I was halfway through implementing the fix when Julian appeared at my desk. He asked what the status on the email situation was. I told him there was a memory leak in one of the nodes, and I was patching it now. I said it should be fully resolved in about 30 minutes. He told me he needed me to stop. I looked up from my screen, confused. He said he was bringing in an outside consultant to assess the issue. He claimed we needed a professional evaluation before we started making changes. I told him I am a professional. I had been managing these email servers for 2 decades. He corrected me, saying we needed an objective third-party professional, someone who could give us an unbiased strategic assessment. I told him it was a memory leak. There is no strategy involved. It is straightforward troubleshooting and patching. Julian told me this is exactly my problem. He said everything is straightforward to me because I cannot see beyond the immediate technical issue. He asked what if this memory leak is a symptom of a larger architectural problem? What if we are treating symptoms instead of causes? The email server was starting to queue messages now. The small issue was becoming a medium issue, and medium issues became big issues fast. I told Julian I understood he wanted to be thorough, but right now we needed to stabilize the system. I offered to do a deeper analysis afterward. He said no, I would wait for the consultant. That was a directive. He walked away before I could argue further. I sat there, watching the message queue grow, and did nothing because I had been given a directive by the director with the Yale degree. The consultant showed up 4 hours later. 4 hours of email problems getting progressively worse, of users complaining, of messages delayed, and productivity tanking. His name was Keith something, and he charged $250 an hour. He asked me to walk him through the issue. I explained the memory leak, showed him the diagnostics, outlined the fix. After 15 minutes of review, Keith said that sounded right. He said to just disable the buggy plugin and patch it. Exactly what I had said 6 hours earlier. I implemented the fix while Keith watched and nodded sagely. The email system stabilized within 20 minutes. Keith wrote up an invoice for $1,500 to tell us what I had known that morning for free. Julian sent out an email praising Keith's expert analysis and quick resolution. He did not mention that I had identified the problem immediately, or that his insistence on waiting had turned a 30-minute fix into a 6-hour outage. That night, I went home and told Karen I was done. The cracks started showing within days. Mark misconfigured a firewall rule. Normally, I would have caught it during my evening system checks, but I was not doing evening system checks anymore. The misconfiguration stayed in place until it blocked access to a critical vendor portal, and suddenly, accounting could not process payments. Sarah forgot to renew a security certificate. Usually, I had calendar reminders for every certificate renewal months in advance, but that was extra work, not in my job description. The certificate expired, and suddenly our client portal threw security warnings. Little things, nothing catastrophic. Just the constant small maintenance that kept everything running smoothly, now not happening. Julian called a team meeting Friday afternoon. He announced they were seeing a pattern of oversights and errors, looking at Mark and Sarah. He said this was unacceptable. Our technology infrastructure needed to operate flawlessly. I suggested mildly that maybe if we had better training processes or more systematic documentation and monitoring. Julian claimed we had documentation. I corrected him, saying we had some documentation, but most of the institutional knowledge about our specific systems and configurations was not written down anywhere. Julian declared that a priority. He told me he needed me to create comprehensive documentation for all systems and processes. I told him that would take weeks of dedicated work and asked if I should pause my current responsibilities. He said no, just manage my time more efficiently. Code for work unpaid overtime. I told him I would do what I could during business hours. Julian's expression tightened, but he could not really argue. He dismissed the meeting. I started the documentation, slowly, carefully, during exactly 8 hours a day, with a proper lunch break. Wrote everything in meticulous technical detail that was absolutely accurate and completely useless to anyone without significant systems administration background. Because Julian wanted documentation, he would get documentation, just not the kind that would actually help him replace me. 2 weeks later, the quarterly board meeting happened. Julian gave his presentation about transformative technology initiatives. I was not invited, but Brenda told me later it had gone extremely well. The board loved his vision for modernizing infrastructure and implementing strategic frameworks. They approved his budget request for additional hires and new tools. Gave him praise for elevating the IT department. My name was not mentioned once. That was when I made my decision. I went home that night and started really planning. Not angry planning, not revenge fantasy planning. Practical, strategic planning. I documented everything I would need to start my own consulting business. Reached out to contacts and let them know I was considering going independent. Updated my resume and my LinkedIn. Got my finances in order. And I looked very carefully at my work laptop and access credentials. And what would happen when I returned them? Because here is something most companies overlook. Their entire infrastructure often runs on systems built and maintained by one or two key people. And when those people leave, if the company has been smart, they have documentation and knowledge transfer and redundancy. But if they have not been smart, if they have taken that person for granted, undermined them, paid someone else twice as much to look important while the actual expert did the real work, well, things can get complicated. I was not planning sabotage. I was not planning to delete anything, or break anything, or do anything malicious. That is illegal, unethical, and honestly beneath me. I was just planning to leave cleanly, professionally, return my laptop, turn in my credentials, and walk away. What happened after that, not my problem. The opportunity came 3 weeks later. Julian announced another reorganization. My position was being restructured into a junior role with a $50,000 pay cut. He would hire a senior technology architect to handle strategic planning, while I would focus on day-to-day technical maintenance. Translation, demotion, pay cut, and hiring someone else to take credit for my work while I did the actual labor. HR scheduled a meeting to discuss the transition. Patricia, all fake sympathy again. She said they understood this was a significant change. Sliding paperwork across the table, she said, I would have 60 days to transition into the new role structure, and of course they would work with me on the compensation adjustment timeline. I asked what if I did not accept the new role. She said then they would consider it a voluntary resignation. I could take the standard severance package, 2 weeks pay per year of service, so 64 weeks in my case, plus my 4 weeks of accrued vacation time. 64 weeks severance. More than a year's salary, basically, plus my unused vacation. I did the math quickly. With Karen's income and our savings, we could manage. It would be tight, but we would be fine, and I would have time to get my consulting business properly started. I told her I needed to think about it. She said, of course, take the weekend, and they would need my decision by Monday. I took the paperwork home. Karen and I went through everything that night after the kids went to bed. She said finally that it was enough. Not comfortable, but enough. The question was whether I wanted to take the deal or stick it out. Sticking it out meant working for less money under Julian's direction, while he brings in someone else to take credit for everything I do. So, that was a pretty clear answer. I looked at the severance agreement. Standard corporate language, non-disparagement clause, return of all company property. Monday morning, I went into Patricia's office at 9 in the morning. I told her I would take the severance. I said I would like to make today my last day. She blinked, surprised. She said today. They were hoping for at least a 2-week transition. I told her the severance agreement did not require a notice period. It said I could separate employment immediately upon acceptance. She said, well, yes, technically, but it would be professional to provide notice. I told her I had been nothing but professional for 32 years. I had worked weekends and holidays and middle-of-the-night emergencies. I had trained staff and built systems and kept this company running. And in return, I had been undermined, disrespected, and demoted in favor of someone whose primary qualification is an expensive degree. So, no, I did not think I owed Apex Financial Partners 2 more weeks. Patricia's expression flickered between surprise and something that might have been respect. She said she would need to process the paperwork and asked if I could give her until the end of the day. I said sure, I would be cleaning out my office. I went back to my desk, started boxing up personal items. The coffee mug, the photos, the succulent. 32 years fit into 2 cardboard boxes. Toby stopped by around 10 in the morning. He asked if it was true I was leaving. I told him it was true. He looked genuinely panicked and asked who was going to handle things. Toby was smart enough to know exactly how much I did and how little Julian understood. I told him he would figure it out, not mean, just honest. Or he would not, and he would find a better job. Either way, he would be fine. He asked if he could call me if something goes really wrong. I told him to ask me again in a few weeks once I was settled. By 10:10 in the morning, my office was empty except for company equipment. I had packed my boxes, wiped my personal files from my workstation, and cleared out my desk drawers. Patricia called, saying the paperwork was ready and asking if I could come down to HR. I signed the severance agreement at 10:15. Patricia processed my exit paperwork. I handed over my laptop, my access badge, my company phone, everything that connected me to Apex Systems. She said they would need me to go through an exit interview. Standard procedure, just a few questions. I pointed out the severance agreement did not require an exit interview. I declined. She opened her mouth, closed it, checked the paperwork. She admitted I was right. It was optional. She looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. For what it was worth, she said she thought I was making the right call and that this was not handled well. I agreed. It was not. I walked out of Apex Financial Partners at 10:47 in the morning on a Tuesday, 58 years old, unemployed, and carrying 2 boxes of personal items. I felt lighter than I had in months. I got to my car, loaded the boxes in the trunk, and checked my phone. Karen had texted to ask how it went. I texted back that it was done, and I was free. Then I drove to the coffee shop near our house, got an expensive latte I normally would not splurge on, and sat by the window watching the morning traffic. My phone buzzed around 11:15. Toby, he sounded frantic. He apologized for bothering me, but said something was happening with the servers. Everything was running really slow, and he did not know what was wrong. I sipped my latte. I asked him if he checked the system monitoring dashboard. He said he did not know how to access it, and Julian was trying to log in but did not have administrator credentials. I told him Julian should, as he was the director. Toby replied that Julian said I never gave him the administrator passwords. I told Toby I gave them to Brenda 6 months ago. She was supposed to add him to the administrator group. Silence. Then he said she claimed she did not remember that, and asked if I could just tell him the password. I told him I did not work there anymore, and I could not give him access credentials to systems I could not authorize. He said it was an emergency. I told him then Julian should use his director authority to contact the IT security team and follow the proper credential recovery procedures. Toby reminded me they did not have an IT security team, they had me. I told him I guessed that was something Julian should have thought about before restructuring my position. I could hear panic in Toby's voice. I told him I was sorry, but I did not work for Apex anymore. He needed to figure this out with his current leadership. I hung up. I felt bad for about 30 seconds. Toby was a good kid in a bad situation, but not my circus anymore. The phone rang again at 11:33. Brenda this time. She said they had a serious situation. The entire system was having major issues, and nobody could access the administrator controls. She demanded I walk her through it. I told her I signed my severance agreement an hour ago. I no longer had any employment relationship with Apex, and I could not provide technical support. She said I could not just leave them hanging. I replied that I spent 32 years building documentation and trying to ensure continuity. Management decided my expertise was not worth keeping. That was not me leaving them hanging. That was them dealing with consequences. She offered to pay me consultant rates, whatever I wanted. I told her I would consider a consulting contract, have Julian email me with specifics about scope, timeline, and budget. I said I charged $550 an hour with a 25-hour minimum. She gasped, noting that was more than what Keith had charged. I told her I would have to get approval, and she asked if I could at least tell her what was happening. I said not without a signed contract. That is how consulting works. I hung up. The calls kept coming. Finally, Julian himself called at 12:15. He told me he did not know what I thought I was accomplishing, but this was extremely unprofessional. Our entire infrastructure was down. I told him he should fix it. He was the director of technology infrastructure. He yelled that I knew damn well he did not have the technical background. I replied, that sounded like a strategic leadership challenge, and I was sure his Yale MBA prepared him for crisis management. His voice went cold. He threatened that if they determined I sabotaged their systems, they would sue me under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. He said they would press criminal charges for hacking. I laughed out loud. I told him Title 18, United States Code, Section 1030, requires intentional, unauthorized access. I told him I had not accessed a single server since I signed the separation agreement and surrendered my credentials. I told him I returned all company property and left. If their systems could not function without me, that was a dependency management failure. Specifically, his failure. Then I added that their failure to maintain fiduciary duty over client data under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act because they fired the only qualified security officer? That was going to be a fun conversation with federal regulators when their $75 million in transactions were compromised. I wished him good luck with that. I hung up and blocked all the Apex numbers. The latte was cold now, but I finished it anyway, savoring every sip. Here is what had happened. Apex's entire infrastructure ran on systems I had built. The monitoring dashboards, the automated maintenance scripts, all custom configured. The automated maintenance scripts ran under my user credentials for historical reasons. When my account was deactivated, those scripts stopped. Database optimization, cache clearing, temporary file cleanup. Everything began a slow spiral into instability. It was a gradual collapse. I had not sabotaged anything. I just left. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was Patricia from HR, begging me to call back because the executive team was asking what it would take to bring me back. I deleted it. Karen called later and said someone from Apex posted on LinkedIn asking for emergency IT contractors. The comments were beautiful, pointing out they had just lost a 32-year veteran. That evening, I drafted a consulting proposal. Apex Financial Partners Emergency Infrastructure Recovery. Rate, $550 per hour. Minimum engagement, 25 hours. Payment, 50% upfront. I sent it to Winston, the CTO. He called and complained about aggressive system. I told him they were standard for emergency consulting, and he was welcome to find someone else who knew their custom infrastructure. There wasn't anyone, he agreed. Friday at 2 in the afternoon, I walked back into Apex as a consultant. I stabilized the critical systems over the weekend. I documented everything for Toby and the juniors. By Monday morning, Winston and Julian wanted to discuss bringing me back at my previous position with a 20% raise. That would be $192,000, still far below Julian's $320,000. I said no. I told them they would have to match what they were paying Julian, same title, same benefits, plus a formal apology, and Julian would report to me. Winston said that was not realistic. I said I knew that was the point. You cannot value expertise only when it is gone. I stood up, told them my invoice would be sent, and walked out for the final time. The invoice came to $20,900 for 38 hours of work. They paid it. 6 months later, my consulting business was bringing in $240,000 annually. A year later, it hit $300,000. Toby eventually left Apex for a better job. Julian lasted barely 2 months before the board fired him. Apex survived, but their stock took a hit. The best revenge is walking away from people who do not value you and building something with people who do.